And I will introduce our next speaker, Veronica Pardo. Veronica serves as the Regulatory Affairs Director for the Resource Recovery Coalition of California. Thanks to the growing complexity of the waste and recycling industry since the passage of California's Global Warming Solutions Act of 2006, Veronica has the pleasure of working on a diversity of issues ranging from waste diversion policies, air and water emissions, organics management, and renewable energy production. Welcome, Veronica.
Hi there, what a pleasure. I see a lot of familiar faces and I'm very happy to be here. It's been several years. I've attended many recycling updates over the years. My name is Veronica Pardo, and you'll see I work for essential service providers, waste management providers. I'm with the Resource Recovery Coalition of California. We're a trade association that represents primarily small to mid-sized local operators doing a number, material recovery facilities, compost facilities. A number of members are actually here today, and we also have national representation from like Waste Management, Waste Connections, Republic, et cetera. So it's been a really great journey with this association for myself for the last 8 years. As I mentioned, I do regulatory affairs, which for some of you may be a little bit confusing, but as was introduced, that's really working with the regulatory agencies like CalRecycle, like the Air Resources Board. And as they're developing regulations that impact the industry, I engage in those efforts. But today I'm really going to focus on how the industry responded, or how our trade association responded to COVID-19. I mean, we're all here. This has been a long journey, and I'm hopeful I can just use this here. Oh, it is working. Great. Lovely. Okay, so the beginning. So what happened? We were on our way to Hawaii for a convention. It was very exciting in 2020, but obviously those plans changed because in March of 2020, we started to receive questions, our jurisdictions, about this novel coronavirus, right? And it came upon us very quickly. And by mid-March, that should say 2020, we created a guidance document for our members around COVID-19, around the practices that they might use to manage this, novel virus, and how they were going to engage with their local government to show, hey, this is what we're doing to keep workers safe and continue providing essential services. Because at the end of the day, waste management is a health and safety issue. If waste is left on the streets, it can have vectors and issues. We've seen this in other states. And so for California, it's very important that we have weekly collection or bi-weekly collection of this material and get it off the streets, right? So we really needed to talk about how are we going to continue providing this service at the local level. And so precautionary measures were taken immediately to reduce the spread of COVID-19 within the association. So what are some of the measures that took place? So a lot, but these are just some of the photos you guys can see. A number of issues, obviously masking, which we're all still doing. You can see here we were using disinfectant spray. I love this ticket example where there, social distancing was put into place. There was a lot of concern about the public entering these facilities, right? Again, essential public service. We have to keep collecting this material, 78 million tons that California creates annually. So it's a lot of material and it has to be managed safely. So as I mentioned, there was some limit. That was actually an issue for the public, right? So we limited some public access. So that actually became a problem. We'll talk about it as I go on here, but everybody was at home and cleaning out their garages, and there was just a lot of waste during this time. So in terms of the industry, where possible, office staff worked remotely, of course. A lot of sort lines were reconfigured. I'd like to mention that in the industry, there are a lot of precautionary measures already taken, right? They deal with waste. So folks are already wearing gloves, and I'll talk about the N95 masks later, but full head to, body protection. They're already managing materials that are of concern, right? So when COVID-19 occurred is a lot of these materials are still kind of treated really the same, but there were questions around that. How long does COVID stay on a piece of plastic and stuff like that? And we had to just counter and say, listen, we've been managing these kinds of materials, viruses of all kinds. This is something that we manage, and we take our protection of our workers very seriously. And so, of course, we're going to go above and beyond, but already we're really using a lot of protection equipment. There have been questions I've gotten like, well, was there an increase? Did you see more folks out sick and stuff like that? And like, not, of course, when there were outbreaks and the like, yes, but like generally speaking, no, because again, these protective practices are already in place. So sort lines reconfigured, put some plexiglass in some instances. Again, this is hard on workers, like office spaces, work spaces, lunchrooms had to be limited, right? And even communal high touch items like the coffee maker. I mean, gosh, it had to be taken away. So these are the kinds of precautionary measures that were taking place at the business level. Okay, so problems. Of course, there were a number of problems. Limited access to personal protective equipment. This was an issue for the industry. So as I mentioned, we already are using personal protective equipment. Many folks in the industry are using the N95 mask already, like predating COVID-19. So the acquisition of these masks became very difficult, right? Even the state was saying this is for medical purposes. So the acquisition of the masks, we had to look to other sources, and they started purchasing the KN95s. In fact, our association even did group purchases of these items. We did group purchases of disinfectant and other items that were very difficult. Remember when you couldn't find these items. You couldn't find toilet paper. You couldn't find, basic stuff. So everybody was dealing with this, as was the industry. The stay-at-home orders, it was just constantly shifting. And even now, we'll talk about it as the state kind of manages this. Like, there's so much complexity and unknown and uncertainty. And at the time, especially for those that were in the Bay Area, there was just a lot of just changing, shifting stay-at-home orders, a lot of uncertainty about what to expect with, can workers even come? Are we going to be able to provide the service, et cetera? And then the other kind of interesting to note is that because, the shuttering of so many commercial businesses, especially restaurants, over half of the restaurants in California closed. We saw a huge decrease in commercial waste and an increase in residential. So all folks were at home, y'all started cleaning out your houses. A lot of waste was produced at the residential level, and those services are, in many cases, subsidized. Your residential rates are subsidized by your commercial rates. So as those businesses shuttered, our folks weren't necessarily getting the income from commercial. It was a problem at the time, the revenue stream. There was a lot of, again, uncertainty about how we're going to manage with the industry, but with a lot of work, and then of course with the funds that came from the feds, like folks were able to kind of make it through this time period. So just kind of to end here, we worked with other industries as well, as I mentioned, as we were able to get some of these items, whether it be sanitizer or masks. We worked with other partners. This is Senator Caballero. We worked with some farm workers. Again, like local folks were doing donations. Here's a member, Cal Waste, locally donating to a medical facility, some supplies. It really was like this, folks. It depended where you were, like whether or not you could get access to this material. And then there was just this outpouring of like support too that was really amazing. We have so many of these photos and signs, and people were just really very loving and caring to their waste management providers. I think there was just an understanding, like, hey, thank you for being out there and on the streets and taking care of us during this difficult time. So I wanted to share that with you. I love that letter, even from a local customer, young customer. And then finally, just to wrap up here. So what's next? Again, there is some uncertainty in the industry. A lot in terms of our trade association, a lot of the members have had success with vaccination of their workers, et cetera. But, there is a question of whether or not there will be a state mandate. And when it comes down to who's going to be obligated to be, vaccinated in that scenario, we have work drivers that are maybe not necessarily alone sometimes during the day. And, we're having issues with driver shortages right now. So there's concern about whether or not the industry and the employees are going to be able to kind of meet this expectation, the state expectation. So they're really grappling with that. But we are obviously promoting as a trade association, getting vaccinated and support that effort from a state perspective. And then of course, what's going to go on with the regulations, still so much uncertainty. And then of course, 13.3, which I'm not even sure if folks are going to talk about that today, but there's a lot that we as a as an industry have to take on in the next few years. So I see I'm at time here, and I'm actually surprised. I thought it was going to be short, but I guess I talk a lot. So thank you, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you. That was great. Question from the room. So raise your hand and a mic will come to you. I see one right there.
From Austin, Texas. Thank you for your presentation. And you mentioned it on the last slide, but one of the things I was going to ask was about driver shortages in Texas and Austin. We're the solid waste utility, so we have drivers that we employ to collect curbside materials from residential. And we've seen persistent driver shortages with the combination of demand for CDL drivers and also limitations from being a municipality in terms of financial compensation and solid waste collection being one of the most hazardous jobs in our state. So it's not really, I guess if I'm looking, how are you handling it here in California?
Yeah, thank you. So I guess we're facing similar issues. Well, with the new training requirements, our members are looking at that to try to maybe provide training so that we can meet the federal requirements and the California requirements. But I think, just overall, it's a continued discussion, and there's a local, waste management comes down to like the local effort, right? So can you find local support? Can you find local employees? So I think that what we're seeing is, again, folks are trying to tap into their local communities, provide really good jobs. Honestly, at the end of the day, these are good jobs and obviously provide a lot of security. So we're still grappling with the same issues, but in the sense of members are looking to train drivers in order to bring them in. But then the concern is if they get trained and then they're going to get, some other company is going to take them away. So, that concern exists, but we understand that we need folks out on the road. And then, just to jump in, we're going to have electric, trucks here soon. And unfortunately, while we are very excited about electric, those trucks cannot perform at the same level as the combustion engine, meaning that we're very likely going to have initially more trucks on the road, more electric trucks in order to perform the same duties, which means we need more drivers. So it's an issue we're all grappling with. Yeah.
Great question. I feel like we've all struggled with driver shortages in the last year. Is there a question online?
We have one from Jesse James. What operational changes did your members make during the pandemic that they carry forward into semi-post-pandemic world?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I think what we're seeing is obviously the remote work, right? So where office workers can work remotely, we're seeing that even within the industry. And then in terms of the social distancing and the mask wearing, again, as I kind of said, a lot of this stuff predated the pandemic, but you're seeing this kind of mask wearing outside of maybe just the material recovery facility where they would normally do that. So mask wearing, social distancing, and then remote working where still possible, we are seeing, myself included. We used to work in the office, and now I work completely from home. Obviously, regulatory affairs being different than waste management. Thank you.
All right. I think we're going to move on. Thank you so much, Veronica. That was great.